Imagine waking up tomorrow to find out that winter is going to last a full 6 months, that there will be no sunlight for weeks on end, that the temperature will never rise above 20 degrees below zero, and that you have to survive without supermarkets, without heated homes, without any of the conveniences we enjoy today. Sounds like a horror movie, right? But this isn't fiction, buddy. This actually happened 20,000 years ago, when our ancestors faced the toughest challenge in human history. The world was a completely different place. It was as if someone had thrown the entire planet into a giant freezer and forgotten to take it out. But here we are, right? We survived. Not only did we survive, but we came out stronger. This is the story of how our ancestors achieved the impossible, how they triumphed over nature when everything seemed lost. It's a tale of the most ingenious strategies ever devised, created by people who had no option but to be brilliant or perish. Get ready to meet the true superheroes of humanity, people who faced challenges that would make anyone today weep, and who didn't just survive, but invented the future. 20,000 years ago, our planet was practically unrecognizable. To give you an idea of how extreme it was, imagine temperatures that were up to 12 degrees colder than they are now. If it's 20 degrees in Mexico City today, back then it would have been 8 degrees below zero. Not just in the mountains, but everywhere. The glaciers were massive, buddy. They covered the whole northern part of America, from Alaska to New York. In Europe, the ice stretched into what we now call Berlin. In Asia, huge parts of the continent were completely frozen. It was as if the planet had a disease that was slowly killing it. With all that ice on land, ocean levels dropped significantly. So much so that you could have walked from Russia to Alaska without getting your feet wet. In fact, that's how the first humans arrived in America. What is now the Bering Strait was just a land bridge. The animals we know today didn't exist then. Instead, there were gigantic creatures that seemed to have come straight from a monster movie. Woolly mammoths the size of a trailer, cave bears bigger than a pickup truck, and saber-toothed tigers that would give you nightmares for the rest of your life. Many of these giant animals went extinct. They couldn't adapt to the changes. But humans did. And that, my friend, is what makes us special. For our ancestors, this meant that only small parts of the world were habitable. They were like tiny oases in a frozen desert. The vast majority of the planet was simply unlivable. Just imagine how it felt for our ancestors to see their world change completely. One day they were living in temperate places, and the next, everything was frozen. It was as if the world had gone mad. If this content is blowing your mind as much as it is mine, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this. I promise each story will be more amazing than the last. When the world froze, our ancestors didn't just sit around waiting to die. Those people were tough, really tough, but survival wasn't just about luck. They had to change everything. Where they lived, what they ate, how they organized themselves, everything. The first thing that happened was they had to move. The places they had lived for generations became uninhabitable overnight. Entire families packed up what little they had and set off in search of warmer lands. It was like a massive migration, but without Google Maps, and no guarantee of finding anything better. But something incredible happened during these journeys. The groups that survived best were the ones that learned to follow the animals. They realized that animals knew where the best survival spots were, so they became smart nomads, following the migrations of caribou, bison, and other animals. The most famous route was the one that led the first humans to America. These brave souls crossed from Asia to Alaska when sea levels were so low that there was a land bridge, and in just a few generations, they spread all across the American continent. It's amazing to think they reached Patagonia, while mammoths were still in Europe. But it wasn't just a walk in the park. They had to compete for territory with other human groups. They had to learn to negotiate, to form alliances, and sometimes to fight for the best hunting spots. It was like the most intense survival game you can imagine. The cool thing is, they developed a sort of mental mapping system. They knew exactly which routes to take, depending on the time of year. They were aware of every water source, every cave that could serve as shelter, every place where food was likely to be found. They also learned to read the signs of nature like it was a book. They could predict the weather by observing the clouds. They knew when it would rain or snow days in advance, and they understood animal migration patterns better than any scientist today. These journeys were not just about survival. They were about exploration. Our ancestors were the world's first explorers. discovering entire continents and adapting to completely new environments in just a few generations. Survival during the Ice Age wasn't just about being physically strong. Our ancestors became extraordinary inventors. Every tool they created, every technique they developed, was literally the difference between life and death. Fire was their secret weapon number one. But we're not just talking about making fire. We're talking about mastering it completely. They developed techniques to keep campfires burning for days, even during the fiercest storms. They learned to transport embers when moving, carrying them in special containers made of leather and moss. What's most impressive is that they invented the first stoves in history. They dug holes in the ground, filled them with embers, and covered them with stones. This provided warmth all night without needing to keep a fire going. It was like having central heating 20,000 years ago. The weapons became more sophisticated than ever. They invented a spear thrower, which was like a mechanical arm that tripled the strength of a human arm. With this tool, a hunter could take down a woolly mammoth from a safe distance. They also created multi-tipped harpoons for fishing in icy waters, and spears with bone tips so sharp they could pierce the thickest hides. But the real revolution was in clothing. It wasn't just about throwing fur over their bodies. They learned how to tan leather, sew complex pieces together, and make garments that were more efficient than much of what we use today. They developed a layering system, an inner layer that absorbed sweat, a middle layer for thermal insulation, and an outer layer that protected them from wind and rain. The boots they made were works of art. They used animal fat to waterproof them, animal fur for insulation and bone for structure. Some of these boots could last for years without breaking down. Houses also changed radically. They invented tents made from mammoth bones that could be quickly assembled and disassembled. They built semi-subterranean shelters that retained heat better than any modern home. Some of these refugees could house entire families and keep warm during the harshest winters. And something incredibly clever, they learned to use the cold as their ally. They utilized the natural chill as a refrigerator, dug holes in the snow to store food, and harnessed ice to build barriers that protected them from the wind. Can you believe how brilliant our ancestors were? If you want to keep discovering more secrets about how humanity conquered the impossible, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I guarantee that each story will surprise you more than the last. But having good tools wasn't enough. Our ancestors had to completely reinvent how they obtained food. And what they did was pure genius. Hunting became an art of military precision. To take down a mammoth, you needed at least 20 people working in perfect coordination. Some tracked the animals, following their trails for days. Others set traps by digging deep holes covered with branches. The most skilled delivered the final blow with spears and harpoons. It was like a deadly ballet where each person had a specific role. The trackers could read the tracks as if they were books. They could tell you how many animals were in a group, whether any were injured if they had young ones, and which direction they were heading. The lead hunters knew exactly where to strike to bring down a giant animal with a single hit. But the most ingenious part was how they used fire for hunting. They would surround groups of animals with torches, steering them toward cliffs or ravines, allowing them to harvest multiple animals at once. It was such an effective strategy that it could feed an entire tribe for weeks. Fishing also became an art. They made holes in the ice of frozen lakes and fished using special harpoons. Some groups developed techniques for ice fishing, with nets made from animal tendons. It was like fishing in a completely different world. They diversified their diets in incredibly smart ways. While meat was important, they also made use of everything they could find. They foraged for roots and tubers growing beneath the snow. They ate insects and larvae discovered in decaying logs. They even consumed certain types of tree bark that provided essential nutrients. The coolest part is that they learned to preserve food like true experts. They used the natural cold as a freezer, but also developed smoking and drying techniques that allowed meat to last for months. They stored animal fat in special containers, which provided the energy they needed to survive the harshest winters. Can you imagine having to hunt a mammoth for dinner? Do you think you would have the courage and skill to survive by hunting giant animals with stone tools? During the Ice Age, being a lone wolf was a death sentence. Our ancestors understood something many people today don't. Cooperation isn't just nice, it's essential for survival. They formed larger and more organized groups than ever before in history. Each person had a specific role based on their skills. Some were the best hunters, others were tool-making experts, and others specialized in natural medicine or caring for children and the elderly. But the most incredible part is that they developed trade networks, connecting groups living hundreds of miles apart. Shells have been found in caves that were weeks away from the ocean, indicating they had sophisticated trade and communication systems. Imagine, a group living near the sea exchanged shells and salt for stone tools, made by a group living in the mountains, and a third group living in the forests traded furs and wood for both. It was like an international trade network, but 20,000 years ago. Communication between groups became an art in itself. They developed signaling systems with smoke, markings on trees that served as messages, and symbols etched into stones to leave information for others. It was like the first social networks in history. Inside each group, the organization was impressive. They had leaders who weren't necessarily the strongest, but the smartest. Elders were highly respected for their knowledge and experience. Women had crucial roles not only in raising children, but also as experts in medicinal plants and survival techniques. The upbringing of children became a shared responsibility among the group. All adults taught children various skills. By age 10, a child already knew how to start a fire, identify edible plants, and assist in hunts. It was like having multiple specialized teachers. They also developed intelligent systems of justice. When conflicts arose, they were resolved with the participation of the whole group. Exile was the most severe punishment because everyone knew that being alone meant certain death. Rituals and ceremonies were not just pretty traditions. They served as tools to keep the group united. Pre-hunt dances helped coordinate strategies. Ceremonies following successful hunts ensured food was shared fairly. Everything had a practical function for survival. Doesn't it seem incredible how our ancestors understood that working together was the key? If these stories are inspiring you, share this video with your family and friends. The story of humanity is too amazing to keep to ourselves. But here's something that might surprise you. In the midst of the struggle for survival, our ancestors not only preserved their humanity, but expressed it in ways deeper than ever before. Art and culture were not luxuries. They were survival tools as essential as spears and fire. The caves of Lascaux, Altamira, and Chauvet show us that in the darkest times, humans continued to create beauty. But these weren't just pretty drawings for decoration. They were detailed maps indicating where to find animals, calendars marking the best times to hunt, and survival manuals etched into the walls. Each painting told an important story. The depictions of animals weren't just art. They were guides showing how animals behaved, which were dangerous and which were good for hunting. It was like having illustrated encyclopedias carved in stone. Music and rituals became fundamental for keeping the community together. When your survival relies on cooperation with 30 other people, you need ways to forge strong bonds. Ceremonies, dances, and songs weren't mere entertainment. They were the social glue that held groups together. They developed musical instruments made from animal bones, flutes, drums, and other instruments used in special ceremonies. Music helped them coordinate work, tell important stories, and keep morale high during the toughest times. Ornaments and tattoos weren't just about vanity. Each group had its unique designs on necklaces, bracelets, and body markings. This allowed them to recognize allies and strangers, something crucial in a world where encounters with unknown individuals could be perilous. Religion and spirituality also evolved. They created rituals to honor the animals they hunted, ceremonies to ask for good luck before hunts, and traditions to remember the dead. This not only gave them hope, but reinforced social rules and cooperation. But perhaps most importantly, they used stories to convey vital knowledge. Legends of successful hunts, tales about medicinal plants, and stories of the best camping spots became living libraries passed down from parents to children. Isn't it incredible that in the harshest moments our ancestors continued creating art and beauty? What do you think this says about what it truly means to be human? Yet, it wasn't all constant suffering. There were specific moments that reshaped humanity, turning points where things began to change in our favor. The toughest moment came about 20,000 years ago. Scientists call it the last glacial maximum. Imagine the most difficult situation you can and multiply it by 1,000. Temperatures were the lowest in 100,000 years. Glaciers covered most habitable land on the planet. It was the time when human extinction seemed most likely. But incredibly, It was right at this moment that humanity demonstrated its true potential. Rather than giving up, our ancestors became more creative, cooperative, and innovative than ever. They developed the most advanced technologies of the era and formed the most sophisticated communities. Around 15,000 years ago, the planet began to show signs that the ice was retreating. Small changes in temperature, glaciers moving more slowly, and new areas becoming habitable. Our ancestors wasted no time. They immediately set out to explore and colonize these new territories. It was during this period that one of the most significant events in human history occurred, the full colonization of America. While the world was still partially frozen, groups of hunters spread from Alaska to Patagonia in less than 2,000 years. It's astonishing to think they colonized an entire continent faster than we've colonized space. It was also during this time that the first experiments with agriculture began. Although full agriculture would come later, some groups started cultivating wild plants and domesticating a few animals. In the Middle East, they began to cultivate wild wheat. In Asia, they started domesticating pigs. These were the initial steps toward the agricultural revolution that would change the world forever. Megafauna began to disappear. Mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and other Ice Age giants went extinct one by one. Some scientists believe this was due to climate change, while others attribute it to human hunting. It was likely a combination of both factors. But most importantly, our ancestors did not go extinct along with the mammoths. They adapted, evolved, and found new ways to survive. As the giant animals disappeared, they learned to hunt smaller game. When the climate changed, they adjusted their strategies. That capacity for adaptation is what brought us to where we are today. As we look back on this incredible era, we realize our ancestors left us lessons that are more important today than ever. In a world where we face our own climate challenges, we can learn a great deal from those who survived the most extreme climate challenge in history. The first lesson is about human adaptability. Our ancestors showed us that humans can change, evolve, and reinvent themselves when necessary. They didn't cling to old ways of doing things when they no longer worked. They were flexible, creative, and open to change. The second lesson is about the importance of cooperation. In the most difficult moments, individual competition did not work. Only by working together, sharing resources and knowledge, could they survive. This lesson is incredibly relevant to us today, as we face global issues that require international cooperation. The third lesson is about innovation under pressure. Some of humanity's best tools and techniques were invented during the Ice Age. When you have no choice but to innovate, human creativity knows no bounds. This reminds us that challenges can be opportunities for growth and improvement. They also taught us about the importance of diversity. The groups that fared best were those with a wider variety in their strategies, different types of food, different skills, and diverse ways of solving problems. Diversity is not just beautiful, it's a survival strategy. Their knowledge of the environment and climate shows us the importance of understanding and respecting nature. They knew that humans are part of the ecosystem, not its masters. They worked with nature, not against it. Finally, they taught us that culture and creativity are not luxuries, they are necessities. Even in the toughest times, they kept their humanity alive through art, music, and storytelling. This reminds us that being human is about more than just survival. And so, brothers and sisters, when the night stretched for months and everything seemed lost, our ancestors not only survived, but also laid the foundations for everything that came after. Every strategy they developed, every technique they created, every lesson they learned contributed to making us who we are today. The Ice Age teaches us that humanity is not strong because we are physically powerful, but because we can think, cooperate, innovate, and adapt. We are strong because we can turn the greatest challenges into opportunities for growth. The next time you face a problem that seems impossible, remember your ancestors. They faced the end of the world and overcame it with ingenuity, cooperation, and determination. If they could survive the Ice Age with stone tools and fire, we can face any challenge that comes our way. This story reminds us that being human means never giving up, always seeking solutions and always caring for our community. Our ancestors gave us the greatest gift of all, proof that there is no obstacle we cannot overcome when we work together. When nights lasted for months, we did not just survive, we thrived. And that is humanity's true victory.